hardest people to show love to are us. You know why? Because we know each other. We're familiar with each other. We have a whole history of failed friendships and rumors and gossip and broken trusts, and you're telling me I got to go back and love those people? We can very easily become like the young child who reaches up and touches the hot stove and learns immediately, never going to do that again. We get burned and we pull back. And we say, I basically don't go to that church, but I'm not going to be that church. I'm not going to love anymore. The risk is too great. Well, Jesus certainly knew betrayal. He certainly knew the risks of loving. And yet in John chapter 13, a story so familiar, we won't take the time to read it, but we know that Jesus, the word says, now showing his disciples the full extent of his love, says that Jesus took off his outer garments, poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet. And who were those guys? Just great, friends and followers and guys that were just going to be there for Jesus? No. In fact, one of them was already in the works in the process of betraying him to execution. One of them was about to deny him 3 times with curses. All but one of them was going to abandon him in his moment of greatest need. And Jesus knew this. He still got down on his hands and knees and washed their feet. And when it says that he washed their feet, I grew up in a church that did foot washing. That was like a regular thing that we partook in. And I always made sure to wash my feet before the foot washing, because you don't really want your grime out there. So we went in with as clean a feet as possible. It was kind of ceremonial. You kind of like pour the water over it. You kind of like, it's more like a wet foot rub. That's really weird sounding, but that's kind of how we do that. But for these guys and for the disciples, they were wearing sandals, walking the streets in Jerusalem, and there was dirt caked on there. And I don't think Jesus did anything halfway. He got down and he scrubbed the dirt off the feet of these disciples, even though they didn't deserve it. They weren't worthy of him to do that. And yet love compelled him to serve them in that way. If we were to take a snapshot view of what the New Testament teaches on love, the evidence for the power of love is overwhelming. Let me quickly read for you some of the New Testament scriptures on love. John 13:34-35, Jesus says this, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Just as I've loved you, you also are to love one another. For by this all men will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another." 1 Corinthians 13, verse 13, "So now faith, hope, and love remain, but the greatest of these is love." Matthew 22:34-40, it's another scene where the religious leaders are trying to catch Jesus. These guys didn't get it. They were a little bit slow on the uptake. And this is what happens. "But when the Pharisees heard that he'd silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?' And Jesus said to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all of the law and the prophets." And Paul, really driving this point home in Romans chapter 13, verses 8 to 10, says, "Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment that are given are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law." If we're to summarize that and kind of blend it up and spit it out, this is what the New Testament teaches about love. It's the best witness of our Christian faith. It is the highest virtue. It is the greatest commandment. And love actually has the power to fulfill the law, to fulfill the commands of God. When Jesus said to the disciples, "A new command I give you," it's the only time he used that kind of language before he gave them an instruction. So we want to kind of perk up. Jesus said, "I'm giving you a commandment. You've got to love one another." In fact, Paul picked up on the concept. The early church knew this commandment as the law of Christ. Christians, what are we to do? What's the new lifestyle? What are the new behaviors that we're to adopt? Love. Well, what does that look like? It looks like love. The Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. That is the fulfillment of the law. Why? Because when I'm pursuing the best interest of another, I can't at the same time go out and pursue my own selfish desires. If I love well, then I will not commit adultery, because adultery breaks the hearts of people and divides families. If I love well, I will not murder, because I don't hate in my heart. If I love well, I won't covet. I'll celebrate what God has done in someone else's life and be content with what He has done in my life. So love fulfills the requirements of God. Maybe this year, a resolution can be